My name is Marlene, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm lying in this ICU bed, my head wrapped in bandages, tubes running into my arms, machines beeping their steady rhythm around me. The morphine makes everything feel distant and foggy, but I can still hear voices drifting through the cracked door. My father's voice, deep and familiar. My stepmother Cassidy's voice, sharp and cold. They're talking to someone, maybe a doctor, and I hear my father say words that freeze my blood despite the fever burning through me. Let her pass. We won't pay for the surgery. Then Cassidy's voice cuts in, asking about a DNR, a do not resuscitate order. My hands start trembling against the thin hospital sheets. They're talking about me. They want me dead. And suddenly, I understand why. $15 million. My inheritance from my mother. The money they've been trying to steal for years, and the reason they've tried to kill me 3 times already. Before we dive into how I ended up here, fighting for my life while my own father plots my death, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're new here, smash that like button and subscribe, because this story is going to take you on a journey you won't believe. Trust me, what happened to me sounds like something from a thriller movie, but every word is true. Stick around to find out how I survived not just one, but multiple murder attempts, and how I finally got justice. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, in a beautiful adobe-style house with a pool in the backyard, and a view of Camelback Mountain from my bedroom window. My childhood was the kind other kids envied. My mother, Lorraine, was a pharmaceutical executive who'd built her career from nothing, climbing from entry-level sales rep to vice president over 20 years. She was brilliant, driven, and despite her demanding career, she always made time for me. Every Sunday was our day. We'd go shopping at the Scottsdale Fashion Square, get lunch at her favorite cafe, and she'd ask me about everything happening in my life. My father, Victor, worked as an architect for a prestigious firm. He was charming, handsome, always knew exactly what to say to make people like him. Growing up, I thought we were the perfect family. I took riding lessons at a stable in North Scottsdale, attended private schools, spent summers at our vacation house on Martha's Vineyard. My parents seemed devoted to each other. Dad would bring Mom flowers every Friday. They'd dance in the kitchen while cooking dinner. I never saw them fight, never heard a harsh word between them. Everything changed when I was 24 years old. I was in grad school at Arizona State, studying art history, planning to become a museum curator. That's when Mom got sick, ovarian cancer, stage 3. The diagnosis came back on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember my mother's face when she told me. She tried to smile, tried to stay strong, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Dad seemed devastated. He immediately took time off work to drive her to chemotherapy appointments. He'd sit with her for hours in those awful treatment rooms, holding her hand, reading to her. I dropped out of school to help care for her. The next 18 months were a blur of hospital visits, experimental treatments, brief moments of hope followed by crushing setbacks. Mom fought so hard. She went through 3 rounds of chemo, tried immunotherapy, even traveled to a clinic in Germany for a trial treatment. Nothing worked. The cancer spread to her liver, then her lungs. The final 6 months were terrible. Watching someone you love deteriorate, becoming a shadow of who they were, it changes you fundamentally. 3 days before she died, Mom called me to her bedside. Dad had gone to get coffee. She grabbed my hand with what little strength she had left and looked at me with those eyes that had comforted me through every childhood nightmare. "Marlene," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I want you to promise me something. Watch out for your father, but never forget your worth." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was just worried about Dad being alone, about me taking care of him. Now I know she was trying to warn me. She died on a Sunday morning, the sun streaming through the hospice window, my father and I on either side of her bed. I felt like my whole world had collapsed. Dad seemed destroyed. He cried at the funeral, delivered a beautiful eulogy about their 28 years together, how she was the love of his life. Everyone commented on how devoted he'd been during her illness. I believed it too. 1 week after the funeral, we met with Mom's attorney. A man named Bernard who'd handled her business affairs for 15 years. The reading of the will took place in his downtown Phoenix office. I sat there, numb with grief, barely processing the words. Then Bernard read the crucial part. Lorraine's estate, valued at approximately $15 million accumulated through stock options, real estate investments, and retirement accounts, was left entirely to me in a trust. Victor would receive the house and $500,000. I stared at Bernard in shock. Dad's face went tight. His jaw clenched. But he smiled, reached over, and squeezed my hand. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your mother wanted to take care of you." Bernard explained the trust terms. I couldn't access the full amount until I turned 35, which was 11 years away. I could receive limited funds for education or medical emergencies, and the trust would release completely if I married with a prenuptial agreement protecting the assets. The purpose, Bernard said, was to ensure the money would benefit me specifically, not be vulnerable to creditors, lawsuits, or other claimants. If I died before 35 without a spouse or children, the estate would revert to next of kin, which meant my father. I watched Dad's reaction as Bernard explained this. His smile stayed fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. Something cold. I dismissed it immediately. He was grieving. We both were. Of course he was upset. Mom had basically said she didn't trust him with the money. But that small moment planted a seed of doubt that I pushed deep down and tried to forget. I wish I'd paid attention to that instinct. It might have saved me years of pain. 4 months after my mother died, Dad brought someone home. It moved back into the family house after dropping out of school, couldn't bear to be alone, and I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard unfamiliar laughter from the living room. I walked in to find my father with a woman I'd never seen before. "This is Cassidy," Dad said, his arm around her waist. "We've been seeing each other for a few weeks. I thought it was time you two met." I stood there frozen, coffee mug in hand, staring at this stranger in my mother's house. Cassidy was 38 years old, 6 years older than me, with bleached blonde hair, heavy makeup, and designer clothes that I later realized were knockoffs. She worked as a personal trainer, had met my father at his gym. "Hi, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with fake warmth. "Your dad has told me so much about you. I'm so sorry about your mom." Something about the way she said it felt wrong. Her eyes were calculating, assessing me like I was a problem she needed to solve. But I was still deep in grief, not thinking clearly. And I told myself I was being unfair. Dad deserved companionship. Mom had been gone 4 months. Except those 4 months felt like nothing. The sheets on Mom's bed still smelled like her perfume. Her coffee mug still sat in the cabinet where she'd left it. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. And now this woman was in our house, sitting on our couch, drinking from our glasses. Within 2 weeks, Cassidy had essentially moved in. She started redecorating immediately. Mom's tasteful Southwestern art came down, replaced with generic prints from HomeGoods. The family photos disappeared. Mom's carefully chosen furniture got sold or donated. I protested, and Dad said, "I need to move on, sweetheart. I can't live in a shrine. It's not healthy." His words made sense logically, but the speed of it felt like erasure. Like he was trying to remove every trace of Mom as quickly as possible. Cassidy was 2 different people depending on whether Dad was around. When he was present, she was sugary sweet to me. "Oh Marlene, you should come to yoga with me. Oh Marlene, let me make you lunch. Oh Marlene, we should do a girls' day." But when Dad left the room, her mask dropped. She'd look at me with cold eyes, make cutting remarks. "You're still living at home at 24? Must be nice not having to support yourself." Or she'd rearrange things I'd deliberately left the way Mom had them, then act innocent when I got upset. I didn't know that lamp was special. It's just a lamp. I started to hate being in my own home. 6 months after their meeting, Dad announced they were getting married. The wedding was quick. A courthouse ceremony with just a handful of witnesses. I attended because refusing would have caused a huge fight, but I felt sick the entire time. Cassidy wore white, which felt obscene given that my father was a widower. She smiled triumphantly throughout the ceremony, her hand possessively on Dad's arm. Once they were married, things got worse. Cassidy started asking pointed questions about my inheritance. So when do you actually get the money? 15 million just sitting there seems like such a waste. What happens if you die before you turn 35? I made the mistake of answering honestly once, explaining the trust terms. Her eyes lit up when I mentioned that the estate would revert to my father if I died. After that conversation, her behavior toward me changed again. She became more hostile, more aggressive about pushing me out of the house. Your father and I need our privacy. Don't you think it's time you got your own place? She started excluding me from family dinners, turning Dad against me with small lies. Marlene said your cooking was disgusting. Marlene rolled her eyes through your entire story about work. Dad started believing her over me. When I'd try to defend myself, he'd say, "Why would Cassidy lie? You're being paranoid." Our relationship deteriorated rapidly. The father who'd sung me lullabies, taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, that person disappeared. In his place was a stranger who looked at me with irritation, who believed every negative thing his new wife said. I realized I needed to leave. At 25 years old, I moved into a small apartment across town. I'd found a job as an assistant curator at the Phoenix Art Museum, making $38,000 a year, barely enough to cover rent and expenses. But I needed independence, needed space from Cassidy's toxicity. I tried to maintain a relationship with Dad, visiting once a month for dinner, but Cassidy was always there, making snide comments, creating tension. 2 years passed like this. I threw myself into work, tried to build a life separate from my family. I'd lost my mother to cancer and my father to greed and manipulation. Though I didn't fully understand the greed part yet. I just knew that the man who raised me was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. 3 years after Dad remarried, when I was 29 years old, the attacks began. It was a Friday evening in October. I'd stayed late at the museum, cataloging a new collection of southwestern pottery. I left around 7, drove my 10-year-old Honda Civic out of the parking garage and onto the street. The museum is in central Phoenix, and I lived in Tempe. About a 20-minute drive, my route took me through some winding roads in the Papago Park area. I was tired, thinking about the weekend ahead, listening to NPR. Then I reached a downhill section and pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. Still nothing. The pedal went straight to the floor with no resistance. My car started accelerating downhill. Panic hit me like ice water. I pumped the brakes desperately, stomped on them. Nothing worked. The speedometer climbed. 30 miles per hour. 40. 45. There was a curve ahead and oncoming traffic. I grabbed the emergency brake, yanked it hard. The car shuddered, but barely slowed. I was going to crash. I was going to die. A pickup truck came around the curve toward me. I swerved hard right to avoid a head-on collision. My car jumped the curb, flew across a strip of desert landscaping, and slammed into a metal roadside barrier. The impact threw me forward against the seatbelt. The airbag exploded into my face. Then everything went quiet except for the hissing of the radiator and a ringing in my ears. I sat there, stunned, tasting blood in my mouth. My left wrist screamed with pain. My head throbbed. Someone was shouting, asking if I was okay. A man pulled open my door, helped me out. An ambulance arrived. Paramedics put a neck brace on me, loaded me onto a stretcher. At the hospital, X-rays showed a broken wrist and severe bruising. I had a concussion. They kept me for 3 days for observation because I'd lost consciousness briefly after the crash. The police came to interview me. A tow truck had taken my destroyed car to an impound lot. The mechanic who examined it called the police with his findings. The brake lines had been cut. Not worn through, not corroded, but cleanly severed. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my car. A detective named Ramona came to my hospital room. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with short gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. She asked me if I had any enemies, anyone who might want to hurt me. I couldn't think of anyone. I lived a quiet life. Worked at a museum. Had a small circle of friends. Then she asked about family. And I hesitated. I mentioned the strained relationship with my stepmother. But I couldn't believe Cassidy would actually try to kill me. That's insane, I told Detective Ramona. She doesn't like me. But cutting my brake lines? No way. The detective wasn't convinced. She investigated for 3 weeks, but there was no evidence. No witnesses had seen anyone tampering with my car. The museum parking garage had cameras, but they didn't cover my parking spot. The case went cold. Dad and Cassidy visited me once in the hospital. A brief 20-minute visit the day after the crash. Cassidy performed beautifully. She cried, hugged me, said, "Oh my God, we were so worried. I thought I'd lost you." Dad seemed genuinely concerned, asking the doctors questions, making sure I had everything I needed. But I noticed something strange. After the doctor left, Cassidy asked very specific questions about my prognosis. Will she have any lasting damage? Brain injury? What's her long-term outlook? At the time, I thought she was just being thorough. Now I realize she was assessing whether her murder attempt had succeeded. A nurse mentioned to me after they left, "Your stepmother asked a lot of medical questions. Very detailed." The comment stuck with me. A small, uncomfortable feeling I couldn't quite name. I recovered over 6 weeks. My wrist healed, the concussion symptoms faded. I bought a used Toyota with money from the insurance payout and went back to work. I became more cautious, checked my car obsessively before driving, looked over my shoulder constantly. But I still didn't connect the dots. I couldn't let myself believe that my father's wife had tried to murder me. Then 3 months after the crash, I received a letter from Attorney Bernard. It was a routine update on the trust, reminding me that in 6 years when I turned 35, the full estate would transfer to me. The letter also included a reminder of the terms. If I died before 35 without a spouse or children, the estate would revert to my next of kin, which was my father. I sat at my kitchen table, reading that paragraph over and over. $15 million. If I died, Dad inherited everything. And through their marriage, Cassidy would have access to it all. The brake lines. The cut brake lines. Oh God. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. They tried to kill me for the money. I started shaking. Had to run to the bathroom and throw up. My own father wanted me dead. 6 months after the car crash, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the brake line thing was random vandalism. Maybe I was imagining threats because of grief and stress. I wanted to believe my father wasn't capable of murder. Then Cassidy started being nice to me. It began with a phone call. "Hey Marlene," she said, her voice warm. "I know things have been tense between us. I want us to have a better relationship. You're Victor's daughter, which makes you family. Can we try to start over?" I was so starved for family connection that I agreed. She started coming by my apartment once a week with homemade food. Casseroles, baked goods, full meals in Tupperware containers. "I make too much for just your dad and me," she'd say. "I thought you might enjoy some home cooking." I was touched. I ate the food gratefully. It was delicious, and it saved me money on groceries. Then I started getting sick. It began subtly. Stomach cramps, nausea, fatigue. I thought I had the flu. But it didn't go away. I started vomiting frequently, lost 15 pounds in a month. My hair began falling out in clumps. I'd wake up to find strands all over my pillow. My gums bled when I brushed my teeth. I could barely get through a workday without needing to lie down. I saw 3 different doctors. They ran tests, couldn't find anything definitive. Finally, one doctor ordered a heavy metals screening. The results showed elevated levels of arsenic and thallium in my blood. The doctor was confused. "This suggests environmental exposure," she said. "Do you work with chemicals? Live near a contamination site?" I couldn't think of any source. Then I went home, looked at my kitchen counter, and saw the Tupperware container from Cassidy's latest delivery. "Chicken pot pie," Shed said. "My favorite recipe." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The food. She was poisoning me through the food. I'd been eating it for 2 months, ever since Shed started her concerned stepmother routine. I grabbed the container, drove immediately to a private lab I found online, paid $300 for expedited testing. The results came back 3 days later. The pot pie contained arsenic trioxide and thallium sulfate in doses calibrated to cause slow, cumulative poisoning, not enough to kill me immediately, but enough to cause organ failure over time. The lab technician who called with the results asked if I wanted to contact the police. I said yes. Then I made a decision I'd regret. I decided to confront my father first. I wanted to believe he didn't know. I wanted to think Cassidy was acting alone. That if I showed Dad the evidence, he'd be horrified, he'd protect me. I was so desperate for my father to still be my father. I drove to the house I grew up in. The house that was supposed to be my inheritance but that Dad now shared with his murderous wife. I had the lab results in a folder, my hands shaking as I rang the doorbell. Dad answered, surprised to see me. "Marlene? What's wrong? You look terrible." I pushed past him into the living room. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Cassidy appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh, Marlene. What a nice surprise." I ignored her, turned to my father. "Dad, I've been sick, really sick. I had my blood tested and found poison. Arsenic and thallium. I had the food Cassidy's been bringing me tested too. It's contaminated with the same poisons." I held out the lab reports. Dad's face went white. He took the papers, read them, his hands trembling. "This must be a mistake," he said. "Some kind of lab error. Cassidy would never." I watched his face carefully, desperately searching for genuine shock, for horror, for the father I remembered. Instead, I saw something else. Calculation. Defensiveness. He was going to choose her. Cassidy walked over, looked at the reports over his shoulder. Her mask dropped completely. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "After everything I've done, bringing you meals, trying to be family, and you accuse me of poisoning you. You're insane." I stepped back, shocked by the venom in her voice. "Dad," I said, pleading now. "Look at the evidence. The lab results are right there. She's been poisoning me for months." My father looked at me, and I saw a stranger. "You're clearly under a lot of stress, Marlene. These accusations are serious and completely unfounded. I think you need psychological help." Cassidy jumped in immediately. "I've been worried about her mental state, Victor. This paranoia, these delusions. Maybe she needs to be hospitalized." They were gaslighting me, right there in my childhood living room. I felt like I was losing my mind. The evidence was in black and white, but my father refused to see it. He chose her. After everything, he chose the woman who was trying to kill his daughter. I left that house knowing I was completely alone. I went straight to Detective Ramona, showed her everything. She wanted to pursue charges immediately. But when we went back to my apartment to collect the remaining food, it was gone. Someone had broken in. Nothing else was taken, just the Tupperware containers from Cassidy. The lab results existed, but a defense attorney could argue the samples were contaminated, that I'd added the poison myself for attention. Without the physical evidence, the DA said they couldn't prosecute. I was devastated. I got a restraining order against Cassidy, moved to a new apartment, and didn't tell anyone the address, changed my phone number. I stopped eating anything I hadn't prepared myself. Slowly, over 3 weeks, my symptoms improved. The poison was leaving my system. But the damage to my psyche was permanent. I couldn't trust anyone. I was completely isolated, terrified, waiting for the next attack. 2 years passed. I turned 31. I had 4 years left until the trust released and I could access my inheritance. 4 years of looking over my shoulder, checking my locks obsessively, examining every piece of food before I ate it. I'd become a ghost of myself, thin and nervous and paranoid. Then I received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "I know what they're planning." The message was brief. "My name is Gretchen. I was friends with Cassidy years ago. I have information about a plot to kill you. We need to meet. I can help." I stared at that email for an hour, debating. It could be a trap. It could be Cassidy using a fake name to lure me somewhere. But it could also be real. Someone who finally believed me. Who had evidence. Who could help me stop them. I was so desperate for an ally that I took the risk. I agreed to meet at a busy coffee shop in Scottsdale during lunch hour. Someplace public and safe. Gretchen showed up exactly on time. She was in her mid-40s, with faded red hair and tired eyes that kept darting around the coffee shop like she expected someone to jump out at her. She ordered a latte, sat across from me, and immediately started talking in a low, urgent voice. "I knew Cassidy 5 years ago, before she met your father. We worked at the same gym. She seemed normal at first, but I started noticing things. She was obsessed with money, always asking about people's finances, who had wealth, who was single. Then she started dating a man named Roland. He was 53, owned a chain of car dealerships, worth a few million. Cassidy moved fast. They were married within 6 months. Roland had a daughter from his first marriage, a woman named Iris, who was around your age. Cassidy hated her. Used to complain about her constantly, said Iris was entitled, was trying to steal Roland's money." Gretchen leaned closer. 6 months after Cassidy married Roland, Iris died. Fell down the stairs in her apartment building, broke her neck. The police ruled it an accident, but I always wondered, because Cassidy had been in that building the same day, said she was visiting a friend nearby. A year later, Roland died in a car accident. Brakes failed on a mountain road. He drove off a cliff. Cassidy inherited everything. $300,000 in life insurance, plus Roland's assets. I tried to tell the police my suspicions, but there was no evidence. Both deaths looked like accidents. Cassidy moved away. And I thought that was the end of it. Then a few years later, I saw her picture in a Society page article. Shed married again, to a man named Victor in Phoenix. I looked him up, found out he was a widower with a daughter. That daughter was you. I knew Cassidy's pattern. She finds wealthy men, marries them, gets rid of any obstacles to inheritance, then arranges accidents. I sat there, coffee going cold in my hands, listening to this stranger confirm my worst fears. "You're saying she's done this before? Killed for money?" Gretchen nodded. "I've been tracking her for years. I have copies of documents, police reports, insurance claims. I can help you prove what she's doing." For the first time in 2 years, I felt hope. Someone believed me. Someone had evidence. We started meeting weekly at different locations. Gretchen brought me files, showed me the pattern. Marriage certificates, death certificates, insurance payouts. Cassidy had been married 3 times before my father. 2 of those husbands had died under suspicious circumstances. Both had children from previous marriages who'd also died in accidents before the husbands. The pattern was unmistakable. I took everything to Detective Ramona. She was interested, said it definitely established a pattern of behavior. But the legal problem was jurisdiction. The previous deaths had happened in different states. Each one had been ruled accidental by local police. Without direct evidence linking Cassidy to those deaths, we couldn't prosecute based on pattern alone. "Stay away from them," Detective Ramona advised. "Keep yourself safe. In 4 years, when you turn 35 and inherit, they'll have no motive anymore. The money will be yours, completely and legally. They can't benefit from your death at that point. Just survive until then." I tried to take her advice. But 4 years felt like an eternity when people were actively trying to kill you. Gretchen became a regular part of my life. We'd meet for coffee, she'd update me on her research, and slowly a friendship developed. She was the only person who understood what I was going through, who didn't think I was crazy. I trusted her. That was my biggest mistake. 3 months into our friendship, Gretchen suggested we meet at her house. I have more documents there, she said. It's safer than carrying them around in public. I agreed without hesitation. She gave me an address in a quiet suburb of Gilbert. I drove there on a Saturday afternoon, feeling actually optimistic for the first time in years. I was going to get justice. I was going to stop them. I knocked on the door of a nice ranch-style house with a 2-car garage and a desert landscape yard. Gretchen opened it with a strange smile I'd never seen before. "Come in, Marlene. We've been waiting for you." I stepped inside and saw them. Cassidy sitting on the couch, my father standing by the fireplace, and another woman I didn't recognize, leaning against the kitchen doorway. I tried to run, but Gretchen grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Did you really think someone would help you?" Cassidy stood up, walked toward me. "Gretchen is my cousin, sweetie. Everything she told you was designed to make you trust her, to make you feel safe, to get you here." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The friendship, the evidence, the hope, all of it was fake. A trap. And I'd walked right into it. I wrenched free from Gretchen's grip and bolted for the door. My father moved faster than I expected for a 58-year-old man. Years of physical labor as an architect had kept him strong. He blocked the doorway, grabbed my shoulders. "Marlene, stop. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I swung at him, connected with his jaw. He stumbled back, shocked. I'd never hit anyone in my life, but adrenaline and terror made me fight. I ran toward the back of the house, looking for another exit. Cassidy caught me in the hallway, grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanked me backward. I screamed, clawed at her hands. We struggled, crashing into a small table. A lamp fell and shattered. Then my father was there again, and between the two of them, they wrestled me to the ground. I was sobbing, begging, "Dad, please, I'm your daughter. Mom loved you. Please don't do this." For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or memory. But Cassidy's voice cut through. "She's standing between us and $15 million, Victor. Your wife left you almost nothing. Left everything to this ungrateful brat who's done nothing to earn it." My head slammed into the corner of a coffee table as they dragged me. Pain exploded through my skull, bright and blinding. I felt wetness on my face, realized it was blood pouring from a gash above my temple. My vision blurred. I think I lost consciousness for a moment because the next thing I knew, I was in the back seat of a moving car. My hands were zip-tied in front of me. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of pain through my head. I tasted copper. Blood was running into my mouth from the head wound. I tried to speak, but my words came out slurred. Cassidy was driving. Dad was in the passenger seat. Through the window, I could see Gretchen following in a second car. "Where are you taking me?" I managed to ask. My father glanced back. His face was expressionless, like he was looking at a stranger, not his daughter. "Just stay quiet, Marlene. This will be over soon." We drove for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. We left the suburbs, drove into an industrial area I didn't recognize. Abandoned warehouses, empty lots, no people. The perfect place to kill someone. They pulled into a deserted parking lot behind a large metal building with broken windows. Cassidy turned off the engine. Gretchen parked next to us. They got out, opened my door. I tried to fight, but I was so weak from the head injury. The world spun when I tried to stand. I fell to my knees on the cracked asphalt. Cassidy pulled a knife from her purse. A kitchen knife with a 6-inch blade. "Should have just died in the car crash," she said conversationally. "That would have been so much easier. Quick, clean, no questions. But you survived. Then you survived the poison." You're stubborn, I'll give you that. But tonight, your luck runs out. I looked up at my father, blood streaming down my face. Dad, I whispered. Please. I'm your daughter. Remember when I was little? You taught me to ride a bike. You came to every school play. You sang me to sleep when I had nightmares. Mom loved you so much. She trusted you to take care of me. His face crumpled for a moment. I saw pain there, maybe regret. But then Cassidy spoke again. Lorraine left you practically nothing, Victor. After 28 years of marriage, she valued you at $500,000. She left millions to a daughter who's done nothing but live off her success. We deserve that money. We've earned it by putting up with her, by trying to build a life together while she's been an obstacle. My father's expression hardened. He nodded. You're right. Let's finish this. I closed my eyes, waiting for the knife. This was it. I was going to die in a parking lot behind an abandoned warehouse, murdered by my own father for money my mother had worked her whole life to earn. Then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, police sirens, getting closer. Cassidy cursed, spun around. Lights flashed at the entrance to the parking lot. Police cars, 3 of them, racing toward us. Detective Ramona jumped out before her car even fully stopped. Drop the knife. Hands where I can see them. Cassidy looked at the knife in her hand, looked at the approaching officers, and made the smart choice. She dropped it. Put your hands on the vehicle, all of you. Now, my father, Cassidy, and Gretchen were pushed against the car, handcuffed. Paramedics rushed to me. I was lying on the ground now. Couldn't remember falling. One of them was talking to me, asking questions I couldn't quite process. Severe head trauma, possible skull fracture, significant blood loss. We need to transport immediately. Detective Ramona's face appeared above me. You're going to be okay, Marlene. We got here in time. How? I managed to whisper. She smiled grimly. I've had a tracking app on your phone for 3 months, with your permission. When you went to Gretchen's address and didn't leave for 2 hours, then your location started moving to this industrial area. I knew something was wrong. Got a warrant and followed. They loaded me into an ambulance. The last thing I saw before they closed the doors was my father in handcuffs, standing next to his wife, both of them watching me with cold, calculating eyes. Even caught. Even facing prison. They looked like they were already planning their next move. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and sirens. At the hospital, they rushed me into emergency surgery. The impact had fractured my skull. There was bleeding in my brain. The surgery took 7 hours. I don't remember any of it. When I woke up in the ICU, I had tubes everywhere, bandages wrapped around my head, machines beeping steadily. A nurse named Francine smiled when she saw my eyes open. Welcome back. You gave us quite a scare. The doctor came in, explained the surgery, said I was lucky to be alive. It'd need follow-up procedures, possibly more surgery, but they'd stopped the bleeding and relieved the pressure on my brain. You're going to recover, he said. But it's going to take time. What I didn't know then was that my father and stepmother had already been released on bail. Their expensive attorney had argued they were pillars of the community, not flight risks. The judge set bail at $200,000 each. They paid it and walked out of jail while I was still in surgery fighting for my life. And 3 days later, while I was lying in that ICU bed, drugged and barely conscious, they came to the hospital to finish what they'd started. That's when I heard my father say those words that brought us to where we started, let her pass. We won't pay for the surgery. The morphine made everything feel distant and unreal, like I was underwater. I'd been in the ICU for 3 days since the emergency surgery. The room was dim. Machines beeped their steady rhythm. And I drifted in and out of consciousness. I couldn't move much because of the tubes and monitors, couldn't turn my head because of the bandages, but I could hear. And what I heard made my blood run cold despite the fever burning through my body. Voices in the hallway just outside my room. My father's voice, that familiar baritone that used to read me bedtime stories. Cassidy's sharper tone. and another voice, male, probably a doctor. They were discussing me like I was already dead. What are her chances without the follow-up surgery? Cassidy asked. The doctor's reply was muffled, but I caught fragments. Not good. Significant brain swelling. Needs the operation within 48 hours. Without it, the pressure could cause permanent damage or death. Then my father spoke, and his words stopped my heart. Let her pass. We won't pay for the surgery. Just 5 words, delivered in a flat, emotionless tone. Like he was declining an extended warranty, not sentencing his daughter to death. Cassidy's voice came next, eager. Can we sign a DNR? As her next of kin, can we refuse treatment? A do not resuscitate order. They wanted to sign away my right to life-saving intervention. The doctor protested, said something about ethics and patient wishes and that I was conscious, could express my own preferences. But my father turned on the charm I'd heard him use 1,000 times in my childhood. Look, doctor. My daughter is in terrible condition. She's essentially vegetative. We need to make the compassionate choice here. Let her go peacefully. It's what she would want. His voice was smooth, reasonable, the voice of a concerned father making a difficult decision. But I knew the truth. He just wanted me dead so he could inherit before the trial, before the evidence could be fully presented, while he still had a chance to use the money to buy his freedom. I heard papers rustling, the doctor, sounding uncertain. I'm not comfortable with this. I need to consult with the hospital ethics board. Cassidy's voice turned threatening. Well, find another doctor who understands our situation. And we'll sue this hospital for keeping our daughter alive against our wishes. They were going to do it. They were going to find a way to kill me. Right here in the hospital. Legally and officially. Tears ran down my temples into my hair. I wanted to scream, to sit up and tell them I was conscious. I could hear everything. But I was so weak. The surgery had taken everything out of me. I could barely lift my hand. Then their voices faded as they walked away. I was alone in the dim room with the beeping machines and my terror. I had to do something. I had to tell someone. Using every ounce of strength I had, I moved my right hand toward the call button clipped to the bedrail. My fingers felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. I knocked the button to the floor first try. No. Come on. I tried again, managed to hook a finger on the cord, dragged it toward me, pressed the button. A minute later, Francine the nurse came in. Oh honey. You're awake. Do you need pain medication? I tried to talk but my throat was so dry. She held a cup of water with a straw to my lips. I took tiny sips, then managed to whisper. My father. Trying to kill me. Don't let him sign anything. Call Detective Ramona. Please. Francine's eyes widened. She looked at me carefully, assessing whether I was confused from the medications or serious. What I saw in her expression told me she believed me. Okay, sweetheart. I'm going to get help right now. She hit a button on the wall, spoke into the intercom. I need security in ICU room 12 immediately. And call the police. Detective Ramona. Tell her it's about the Marlene Winters case. Within 20 minutes, Detective Ramona was in my room. I explained in halting whispers what I'd overheard. She recorded everything on her phone, then made calls. Hospital security was notified. My father and stepmother were banned from the hospital property immediately. The restraining order was extended to include medical decisions. A court-appointed guardian was assigned, Attorney Bernard, my mother's old lawyer who'd handled the will. He was given temporary authority over my medical care. But there was a problem. The follow-up surgery I needed cost $350,000. It was experimental, not fully covered by insurance. Bernard couldn't access the trust funds without a lengthy court process that would take weeks. I didn't have weeks. The doctors said I had 4 days, maybe 5, before the brain swelling caused irreversible damage or death. I was going to die because I couldn't pay for the surgery that would save me. The irony was crushing. I was worth $15 million on paper, but I couldn't access a single cent of it. The story somehow leaked to the media. maybe a hospital employee, maybe Detective Ramona trying to put pressure on my father. Whatever the source, by the next morning, my case was all over the news. Father refuses to pay for daughter's life-saving surgery in attempt to inherit her millions. The story went viral. Outrage poured in from strangers across the country. People were horrified. How could a father do this to his child? A GoFundMe appeared, started by someone I'd never met. Strangers donated. $5 here, $20 there. A few larger donations of $100 or $200, it raised $80,000 in 2 days. I was moved by the kindness, but it wasn't nearly enough. Then I got a visit from the museum board. The executive director and 3 board members came to my ICU room. "Marlene," the director said, "we've discussed this as a board. Your family. You've worked with us for 7 years, dedicated yourself to our mission, brought passion and expertise to every project. We take care of family." The board voted unanimously to cover the cost of your surgery. All of it. I started crying, which made my head hurt worse, but I couldn't stop. These people, my colleagues and mentors, were saving my life. They'd found $350,000 in their budget because they valued me as a human being, not as an inheritance to fight over. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. That night, another crisis hit. The hospital's computer system was hacked. Someone infiltrated the database and changed my medical records. They listed me as allergic to the anesthesia medications the surgical team had planned to use. If the doctors had proceeded with those drugs, I would have died on the operating table. The IT department caught the alteration during a routine pre-surgical check, just 2 hours before I was supposed to go into surgery. They traced the hack to an IP address, Cassidy's home computer. Shed tried to kill me again, from outside the hospital, using technology. Detective Ramona arrested her that night. Bail was revoked this time. The judge said she was clearly a danger and a flight risk. My father was arrested as an accessory. They were both remanded to custody to await trial. Gretchen had already taken a plea deal, agreed to testify against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. Finally, they were behind bars where they couldn't hurt me. The surgery went forward the next morning. It took 6 hours. The surgeon relieved the pressure on my brain, repaired the damage from the warehouse attack, gave me a chance at recovery. I spent 3 more weeks in the hospital, then transferred to a rehabilitation facility. Slowly, painfully, I healed. My memory had some gaps. I had chronic headaches that the doctors said might be permanent. But I was alive. 4 months after the warehouse attack, I sat in a courtroom for the beginning of the trial. I'd recovered enough to testify, though I still got dizzy if I stood too long, and my short-term memory wasn't perfect. The prosecution had built a comprehensive case, 3 counts of attempted murder for the brake tampering, the poisoning, and the warehouse attack. Additional charges of conspiracy, fraud, assault, computer crimes, and attempted medical fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Gretchen testified first, describing the entire plot in detail. How Cassidy had researched my father before ever meeting him, learned about his recently deceased wife and the inheritance structure. How Shed deliberately manufactured their meeting at the gym. How Shed planned from day one to get rid of me so she and Victor could access the $15 million. Gretchen explained the brake line sabotage. Cassidy had hired someone to do it, paid $5,000 cash, but Gretchen had been there when the arrangement was made. She testified about the poisoning plan, how Cassidy had obtained the arsenic and thallium through online sources, how Shed carefully calculated doses to cause slow organ failure that would look like natural illness. Detective Ramona presented the evidence timeline. Photos of my destroyed car with the cut brake lines. Medical records showing the heavy metal poisoning. Hospital records from the warehouse attack. Computer forensics showing Cassidy's attempt to alter my medical files. The pattern was undeniable. 3 separate, escalating attempts to kill me, each more brazen than the last. Then the prosecution introduced evidence of Cassidy's past. They'd investigated her history thoroughly, her previous husband Roland and his daughter Iris. The suspicious circumstances of both deaths. Insurance payouts totaling nearly $500,000 that Cassidy had collected. Another husband before that, a man named Edmund Huad, died in a house fire. Cassidy had been the only survivor and the beneficiary of his life insurance. The prosecution argued that Cassidy was a serial killer who targeted wealthy men, married them, eliminated obstacles to inheritance, and then arranged fatal accidents. My father was her most ambitious target yet because the payout was so much larger. The defense tried to paint me as mentally unstable, a troubled woman making false accusations for attention. They pointed to the 2-year gap between the poisoning attempt and the warehouse attack, suggested I'd fabricated evidence. But the medical records didn't lie. The arsenic in my blood was real. The skull fracture was real. The hacked hospital records were traced definitively to Cassidy's computer. Their case fell apart under the weight of evidence. My turn to testify came in the 3rd week of the trial. I walked to the witness stand on shaky legs, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor asked me to describe my relationship with my father before my mother died. I talked about my childhood, how loving Head seemed, how devoted to our family. Then, I described the change after Mom's death, the rapid remarriage, Cassidy's hostility, the growing distance between my father and me. I described each attack in detail, the terror of the brake failure, the months of illness from poisoning, the moment I realized my own father wanted me dead. When I got to the warehouse attack, I looked directly at my father. He sat at the defense table in a suit, his hair grayer than I remembered, his face drawn. I described how Head grabbed me, how I'd begged him to remember who I was, his daughter, the little girl Head raised. I described the absolute emptiness in his eyes when he looked at me, and said this will be over soon. The courtroom was silent. Even the jury looked shaken. The defense attorney cross-examined me, tried to suggest I was exaggerating, that my head injury had confused my memories. But I had Detective Ramona's testimony corroborating everything. I had the physical evidence. The lawyer couldn't shake my story because every word was true. My father never took the stand. His attorney advised against it. Cassidy testified in her own defense, tried to play the victim, claimed she loved Victor, that Marlene was disturbed and jealous, that everything was a misunderstanding or coincidence. But the jury didn't buy it. They'd seen too much evidence, heard too many witnesses. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 8 hours. The verdict came back, guilty on all counts. I sat in the courtroom gallery, my hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles were white, and listened to the judge read the sentences. Cassidy got 45 years in prison for 3 counts of attempted murder plus the additional charges. At 52 years old, she'd likely die in prison. Victor got 35 years as an accessory and co-conspirator. He was 60 years old. He'd be 95 if he served the full sentence. Gretchen, who'd cooperated and testified, received 15 years with possibility of parole after 10. I felt nothing watching them led away in handcuffs. No satisfaction, no relief, just a deep, hollow emptiness. My father was gone. Had been gone for years, really, since the moment he chose money over his daughter. This was just making it official. After the trial, Attorney Bernard called me to his office. He had something to give me. A sealed envelope, cream-colored paper with my mother's handwriting on the front. For Marlene, to be opened only if Victor threatens her. Bernard explained that my mother had left this letter with instructions. If my father ever did anything to harm me, Bernard was to give me this letter. Otherwise, it was to remain sealed. My hands shook as I opened it. My mother's handwriting, familiar and beloved, covered 2 pages. My dearest Marlene, it began. If you're reading this, then my worst fears have been realized. I suspected for years that your father married me for money. There were small signs. The way He'd ask about my business deals, his interest in my investment portfolio, comments about what we'd do with my money after retirement. I told myself I was being paranoid. But when I got sick, really sick, I noticed something change in him. I caught him on the phone one day, talking to someone. I only heard part of the conversation, but the words I did hear chilled me. Just a few more months and we'll be set. He didn't know I was listening. I realized he was waiting for me to die. The letter continued. I changed my will to protect you. I put the money in a trust with age restrictions so he couldn't access it through you. I wanted to tell you, to warn you. But how do you tell your daughter that her father might be dangerous? I hoped I was wrong. I prayed I was wrong. But I had to protect you, just in case. The money is yours, sweetheart. It represents decades of my work, my sacrifice, my success. Use it to build a beautiful life. But more importantly, know that you were always truly loved by me. Don't let bitterness consume you. That's what he'd want. Don't give him that power. Live well, love deeply, and know that I'm always with you. Mom. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. My mother had known. She'd seen through my father's act and protected me from beyond the grave. The trust structure that had seemed so cold, so mistrustful at the time, was actually an act of profound love. She'd saved my life by making sure my father couldn't benefit from my death. 1 month after the sentencing, the court finally released my trust funds. I was only 32, 3 years before the scheduled release. But given the extraordinary circumstances, the judge agreed to transfer the full estate to me immediately. $15 million, plus 8 years of growth and compound interest, brought the total to nearly $18 million. The first thing I did was repay the museum board, $350,000 plus a $1 million donation to establish a permanent endowment in my mother's name. The second thing was to create a foundation, the Lorraine Winters Foundation for Family Violence Survivors. I dedicated $10 million to helping people escape abusive family situations, funding legal services, safe housing, counseling, and education programs. Because I'd learned the hard way that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who hurt you most. 2 years have passed since the trial. I'm 34 years old now, living in a small adobe cottage in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I moved here for a fresh start, away from Phoenix and all its painful memories. The house is surrounded by juniper trees and has a view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It's peaceful here. I work as an independent art consultant, helping collectors and museums acquire pieces. I don't need the money, but I need the purpose. I need to feel like I'm contributing something meaningful to the world. The foundation is thriving. We've helped 370 families escape domestic abuse situations in the 2 years since we launched. We've funded 12 major court cases against abusers. We provide college scholarships for children of violence survivors. Every month, I get letters from people whose lives we've touched. A woman who escaped her violent brother who was stealing her inheritance. A man whose stepfather had been systematically poisoning him for insurance money. Their stories echo mine in 1,000 different ways, and knowing that I can help them find justice makes my own suffering feel less meaningless. Last month, I received a letter from the state prison, my father's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was an apology, or an attempt at one. He claimed he'd gotten caught up in Cassidy's schemes, that she'd manipulated him, that he'd always loved me but made terrible mistakes. He asked for forgiveness. He wanted me to visit him. I read that letter twice, then sat in my garden for a long time thinking about forgiveness. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Some wounds don't close. And that's okay. I don't owe my father forgiveness just because he's had 2 years in prison to regret his choices. He had dozens of opportunities to stop, to choose me over money, to be the father I needed. He chose wrong every single time. I wrote a brief response. 10 words. I hope you find peace with yourself. I have found mine. I sent it and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I don't need his apology. I don't need closure from him. I've built my own closure through therapy, through helping others, through learning to trust again. I've made real friends here in Santa Fe. People who don't know my story, who value me for who I am now, not for what I survived. I joined a support group for survivors of family violence. Turns out there are a lot of us. People whose parents, siblings, spouses, children tried to hurt them in unthinkable ways. We meet twice a month in a community center and share our stories. We remind each other that we're not crazy, not alone, that we survived something terrible and that survival is worth celebrating. I even started dating, which I never thought I'd be brave enough to do. His name is Wesley. He's 40 years old, teaches art at a local high school. He knows my whole story. I told him on our third date because I couldn't build a relationship on secrets. He didn't run. He didn't pity me. He just said, "You're incredibly strong. I'd like to get to know you better." We've been together for 8 months now. It's slow and careful, and that's exactly what I need. One evening, we were sitting on my porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Wesley asked me what I'd learned from everything that happened. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I learned that blood doesn't mean loyalty. That real family is chosen, not given. That survival isn't enough. You have to rebuild. And that my mother's love protected me even after her death. I thought about Mom's final letter, her instruction to not dwell in bitterness, to not give my father that power. For years, I'd been consumed by fear and anger, but now, finally, I was living the life Shed wanted for me. The money she left wasn't just about financial security. It was about freedom. The freedom to help others. The freedom to build something meaningful. The freedom to choose my own path without fear. I use my inheritance to prevent other families from being torn apart by greed. I help other daughters and sons escape the people who should protect them but instead prey on them. That's my mother's real legacy. I got a message from Detective Ramona last week. Cassidy was denied parole. She'll serve her full 45 years. My father will be eligible for parole in 20 years, when he's 80 years old. Probably he'll die in prison. That news should have made me feel something. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. Instead, I just felt a quiet sense of closure. Justice had been served. I'd survived. More than that, I'd thrived. I built a life that matters, filled with purpose and genuine connections. Last night, I attended the Foundation's annual gala. 200 people filled the ballroom of a historic hotel in downtown Santa Fe, survivors who'd escaped abuse, donors who believed in our mission, lawyers and advocates who'd helped us fight for justice. I gave a speech about resilience and hope. I talked about how darkness doesn't get the final word if we refuse to let it. I looked around that room at all the lives that had been changed, all the people who'd found safety and rebuilt their futures, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride, not just in what I'd survived, but in what I'd created from the ashes. After the event, I drove home through the clear desert night, stars brilliant overhead. I sat in my garden, the same spot where I'd read my mother's letter 2 years ago, and I thought about her. "Mom," I said quietly to the night sky, "I made it. I'm okay. Better than okay. The love you gave me was enough. It will always be enough." Peace settled over me. Not because the pain is forgotten. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still check my locks obsessively. I still have moments of panic when someone gets too close too fast. The trauma is part of me, woven into who I am. But it doesn't define me anymore. I'm not just a survivor. I'm a builder. A creator. A woman who took the worst betrayal imaginable and turned it into something that helps others. That's the inheritance that truly matters. Not the $15 million, but the strength my mother gave me to survive. The wisdom she imparted to choose love over bitterness. The example she set of building something meaningful with your life. I learned that some families are born from blood and betray you, others are built from choice and save you. I chose to build the second kind. My family now includes the friends who stood by me, the colleagues at the museum who saved my life, Detective Ramona, who believed me when no one else did, Attorney Bernard, who protected my mother's wishes, the hundreds of survivors I've helped through the foundation who remind me daily that healing is possible, and Wesley, who sees all my scars and loves me anyway. These are the people who've earned the title of family, not through biology, but through loyalty, compassion, and genuine care. My father taught me what family shouldn't be. My mother taught me what it could be, and I've spent the last 2 years learning to create it for myself. The money sits in investment accounts, carefully managed, generating returns that fund the foundation in perpetuity. I live modestly in my small cottage. I don't need much. I have everything that matters: safety, purpose, connection, peace. Sometimes people ask if I regret what happened, if I wish things had been different. The truth is complicated. Of course, I wish my mother hadn't died. I wish my father had been the man I thought he was. I wish I hadn't spent years looking over my shoulder, terrified, isolated, barely surviving. But I can't regret where I ended up. The woman I've become, forged in fire and trauma, is stronger and more compassionate than the naive 24-year-old who lost her mother. I understand suffering now in a way that makes me better equipped to help others through theirs. My scars are ugly, but they're also proof that I survived, that I fought, that I refused to let hatred and greed destroy me. So no, I don't regret my journey. I just wish it hadn't cost so much. As I sit here in my garden, breathing in the scent of sage and juniper, watching stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, I feel something I never thought I'd feel again: gratitude. I'm grateful to be alive. Grateful for the people who saved me. Grateful for the opportunity to turn my pain into purpose. And most of all, grateful to my mother, who loved me enough to protect me even from beyond death. Her final gift wasn't the money. It was the belief that I was worth protecting, that I deserved to live, to thrive, to build a beautiful life. I'm living that life now, Mom. Every day, I'm living it. So let me ask you, have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members? How did you find the strength to rebuild after betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear your stories of survival and healing. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life accounts of resilience and justice. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that you can build a beautiful life even after unthinkable betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story, for being here, for being part of this community that believes in healing and hope. I'm sending you all strength and peace on your own journeys. Remember, you're worth protecting, you deserve safety and love. And sometimes the family you choose is the one that saves you. Take care of yourselves out there. And I'll see you in the next story.